What would it look like to claim your space as a leader and make a positive impact in your organization or community? Get ready to lead courageously and authentically from the core of who you are. Your leadership coach, Dr. Kristen Albert, will help you recognize how you are uniquely gifted to lead in your spheres of influence and help you become equipped and confident to handle the challenges of leadership. Take your leadership to the next level and create your turning points in leadership. Let's get started. Here's Kris.
Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Kris Albert, and I'm happy that you joined us today. This webinar is a special edition of the Turning Points in Leadership program. I'm a leadership coach, and as a lifelong educator, I've been very dedicated to bringing education and leadership together because I believe that every single one of us is responsible for leading in our sphere of influence. We are all capable of leading in our sphere of influence, whether we are teachers, whether we're administrators, whether we're at the top of the food chain or the bottom of the food chain. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, every single human being has autonomy as a leader and has authority as a leader. And so we're going to explore this concept of leadership today through a very special presentation about guiding people through change, what leaders need to know. So I'm really happy that you're joining us today. And before we go any further, I would like to introduce you to my co-presenter, and her name is Brenda Morales. Brenda, will you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
I sure will, Kris. Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Morales. I'm an ELD teacher. That is the updated term for ESL, in case you were unaware. It is definitely a better term. This year will mark 22 years in that position for me and 30 total in education. So I've been doing this for quite a while, and I've seen change come and go, as you can imagine. And before we get started, I just want to point out that I am not here to criticize past administrators, past decisions. I am here to offer suggestions from a teaching perspective, having had lots of change imposed on me and my colleagues, how you can better help your staff and therefore the students through significant changes or even insignificant ones that may arise.
Thanks, Brenda. I think that's really important to say. And another piece of that is also if there are teachers that are watching this, recognizing that as teachers, you are leaders in your classroom, and you are leaders even if you don't have a title, even if you have administrators that are your supervisors. You too are leaders in this setting as well. And so there are things that you can learn from this video and how you manage change and transition in cooperation with administration, in cooperation with your students. Would you agree with that, Brenda?
Absolutely. That is something that I firmly believe in, that even if you don't step outside your classroom to do anything in leadership, the traditional teacher leader as mentor or department head, you're the leader of that classroom. You set the tone, you make the big decisions, you guide what happens. So please do not think of yourself as just a teacher. You are a leader, and you need to view yourself as a leader. And I think the sooner teachers view themselves in that capacity, they'll feel more empowered to be able to do things maybe more effectively, to feel more confident in speaking out and asking questions and advocating for themselves and their students.
Fabulous. Yeah, I really appreciate that ad. So again, for our watchers here, we're going to be talking about guiding people through change, what leaders need to know. And of course, you haven't experienced change in education, right? There was no change due to COVID-19. We are just experiencing, it seems like the changes are fast and furious, and a lot of things that we simply don't have autonomy over, right? We didn't have autonomy over COVID-19, right? We are in what's called a VUCA environment. It's very volatile, VUCA, uncertain, U, complex, C, and ambiguous. And so leading through VUCA is the challenge for leaders now. It's not enough to just think you know what's coming. You've got to be able to respond creatively to the interruptions that are happening in education all the time. And so in this transition model that we're going to share with you, we're going to use William Bridges' transition model as part of our presentation today. And you may or may not be familiar with it. Let me set the slideshow here. Okay, so Bridges' transition model has several components to it. You can see on this grid, you can see performance is the vertical axis and time is the horizontal axis. Performance over time. When change happens, there are 3 phases to that: ending, losing, and letting go. That's the first phase. The second phase is the neutral phase, and the third is a new beginning. So when you think about change and transition, what is it that you have autonomy over? Well, here's a distinction I think that's really important for you to see, that Bridges makes very clear, that there is a distinction between change and transition. Change is something that happens to you. Transition is how you internally navigate those changes. So as you can see here, change is external. It's something that happens to people, even if they don't agree with it. Change can happen very quickly, kind of like the weather, when the weather changes from 1 hour to the next. Transition, on the other hand, is what happens in people's minds when they go through change. Transitions generally happen over time, sort of like passing from one season to another. But what we find, and in business and in education, in fact, many systems, most systems, is that when change happens, we have this expectation that people are going to adopt the change and make the transition, right? And that is a gap in expectation and a gap in reality. So let me get the next slide here. So Brenda, I want you to take a look at this through your eyes. So we've got change on the left, and we have transition on the right. And they give a few more details about change versus transition. What stands out to you?
The first thing that stands out to me is change, like you just said, is, oh, it's fast, it's quick. But if you look at transition, weeks, months, or years. So when someone says, okay, here's our new policy, go do it, and everyone starts to freak out, this is why, because we need time to process it. And as it says here, it's different for each individual. So I may be able to come to terms with it within a week or 2. My colleague may take a month, and some people may just sort of grit and bear it and never really fully adapt to it. And I think this is important for those presenting the change, whatever it is, whether it's just a minor policy tweak or some brand new initiative, to really think about how it's going to be presented and to tell everyone it's okay to not feel good about this right now. It's okay for you to worry and wonder. And we understand that. And I get it. You know, my principals often talk about, you know, how they get the pressure from the state. You know, everyone has pressure on them from above, basically. But to get the staff really on board, just a little bit of, hey, I get it. I understand how you're feeling a certain way about this. I understand that maybe you're uncomfortable. Come talk to me. You know, set up, if it's something that happens over the summer and you send out an email, set up a coffee morning. Hey, here's this new thing that's coming. We're going to have a couple of meetings where you can come, we'll have some coffee, we'll chat about it if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you'd like to learn more. Just small things like that, and allow people to really work through how they feel so that you can get that transition happening in a more proactive way.
I love that. And you know what's really interesting about that is one of the tools that I use is the leadership circle profile. And the leadership circle is a circle that shows very clearly what behaviors are positively related to leadership effectiveness and what are negatively, which behaviors are negatively. And so when you were saying, call a meeting, bring people together, a little bit of empathy. Here's what's coming down the road, recognizing that people are going to be in this space of transition when they're faced with a change. And so one of the things that you mentioned, that empathy, that listening, that importance of bringing people together in community and joining together to work through the challenge, those are actually examples of positive leadership. Paying attention to relationships is every bit as important as paying attention to the task of implementation. So you hit on a really, really important piece of that, and I really appreciate you saying that. And I'll say to those who are listening, if you want to learn more about the leadership circle and leadership circle profile, reach out to me. I'd be happy to share that information with you. So one of the distinctions that that William Bridges makes is he says that change is actually neutral, that it is our reaction to change that is either positive or negative, right? So, and maybe you've heard that in terms of, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it, right? It's how you choose to react to it. We see this with children. We say, well, you don't have to react. You don't have to, so yes, but we are emotional beings. And so change is neutral, and the emotional piece is the positive, where the positive or negative fits in. The other piece that you and I were talking about the other day, Brenda, is why do people fear change? You hear so many people saying, oh, not another thing. I don't like change. What is it about change, do you think, that has people fearing change?
It's the uncertainty. I heard either on a TED Talk or somewhere recently that uncertainty is one of the only fears that we are actually born with, that is not taught to us. And
Interesting.
that kind of makes sense if you think about, people in the past. You didn't know what was around the corner or in that cave that you were exploring. So, it's just that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to work for me. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can buy into this. All those things, I don't know if this is something that is going to require a whole lot more work for me, or I don't know if this is something that's going to go away in 2 years. All those things are in your brain when you hear, oh, here's the new thing that we're going to try or do. And so that being said, look, as a leader presenting this, if it's something that has similar, and in education, we know things are often repackaged and brought in as something new. It's happened a lot in meetings. We'll get this new thing, and half an hour in, someone will say, oh, hey, this reminds me of this initiative we did 5 or 6 years ago. So if you see that there is something in the new thing that is similar to the old thing, tell your staff, hey, look, you already know this part. Put it into steps. If it's something that can be multi-phased in, maybe you just say, all right, we've got this whole big new thing. There's 7 pieces, but for the beginning, just work on part 1. So maybe it's just, you got to write your objectives a little differently, just to think of a lesson planning example. So we're going to just add some things into your objectives, and that's all. We want you to do that for a couple of weeks. And when you feel comfortable with that, we'll move on to the step 2. So if you can do it that way, let them know what you already know about this, and we're going to break it down so it's not all at once. That takes away some of that uncertainty and creates a greater buy-in among your staff. Otherwise, you could face an open rebellion.
Oh, yes. I think every one of us has experienced that open rebellion from time to time in education. Oh my goodness. I also think people fear change because they've been through changes that have been poorly managed.
That too,
And
yes.
they get like, Not
Here
another
we go
change.
again.
Here we go again. Can't take another change.
Hmm.
It just isn't, So yeah, a lot of different reactions to change, but many people are not saying, hey, bring it on. I love change.
Right.
Yeah, that's very, um,
But they could be if it was managed in a way that made it seem like this is going to make your job easier. You're going to be more effective. This is going to be something you love to do once you learn it. Then
mhm,
people might be like, cool, I need something new.
yeah. And I also liked how you said as you were describing a way to facilitate change in those steps, bringing teachers in and helping them to say, giving them that space to say, here's the new initiative. What is similar to what we were doing before, what you were doing before? And don't we do that in our classrooms? We build on what the students know, right? And we start with what they know, and then they move to what they don't know. Why don't we do that when we're when we are bringing out new initiatives? Doesn't that creates a sense of safety, right? It's not something that's going to be completely knocking us off our seat, but instead, this is what's familiar. This is so look at this, right? And it's not, do you notice how the shift is from, if I'm the administrator, I'm not telling, right? I am inviting. Just students don't want to be told, right? But when you invite them to observe and to notice, isn't this just good teaching, right? We bring this new initiative, we have the teachers examine it and say, so what's familiar? What can you see that you can continue doing and drawing from? And then we work through those 7 phases, right? That you were
And
talking
I wonder how much of it is just due to perceived time constraints because so often our meeting agendas are just packed
Yeah.
and there's so very little time to just really sit with something new and process it and
Hmm.
really take the time to dig in and get to know whatever the new thing is. I mean, I just looked at our agenda for next week and it's just like, every minute is just crammed full of something. So maybe if there's something new and think intentionally on giving more time and t- putting that as a priority, if that's the new thing, whatever it is, whether it's a new way of lesson planning or a new instructional model or observational model that you're using, if that's going to be the priority, then that needs to be the priority, and some other stuff can just be an email or um, another time.
Yeah, yeah. And that constraint of time, right? Then that puts us into the reactive leadership mode, right? We've got to control it because we don't have enough time. We're seeing things from a scarcity mindset instead of from,
Abundance.
yeah, from abundance. And I'm sitting here as we're talking, and I don't want to get far away from what we're talking about here, but I'm already thinking, I can think of a number of ways that could facilitate that information, even beyond email, that would be bite-sized, that would be actually approachable, that people
Right.
wouldn't mind, so that space could be made for the important
It
conversations.
could be like a Google document, or it could be one of those jam boards, or if you
Yeah,
use a learning management system like Schoology, it could just be a presentation on there or a video or something,
right.
something that goes through it in a way, that doesn't take away time from allowing people to work through a transition, which is if we all know that that whole Maslow, you need to feel safe and secure before you can learn. So if a teacher is feeling anxietal about a new thing, they're not going to be really taking in other whatever is coming.
Mhm.
So they need the time to really work through that. Otherwise they're just going to tune out everything and sit there worrying the rest of the day about whatever. Some
Yeah,
will, not everyone, some will.
yeah, very good points. Well, let's hop back to the model at this point. And before we do, I would like to ask you to think about a time where a big change that you've been through in education, that was perhaps something that you didn't have authority over, or you didn't have autonomy over, and it was something, I hate to say done to you, but it was given to you, and you had to do it, and you didn't have autonomy to deal with it yourself in the way that necessarily you wanted to. Can you talk to us about, share an example of that?
I mean, the obvious one is right there, right? The pandemic. That for so many people on so many levels just wiped out autonomy.
Mm.
And I still remember the first shutdown
Mm.
and March 13th,
Yeah.
2020. And I met my husband and some of his coworkers after work. They were all also, he was also teaching at the time. And everyone's like, holy cow, we have like 2 weeks off. Oh my gosh. And at first it was like, okay, this is kind of cool. We'll see what happens. And then it just kept going. And we were like, okay, how do we end the school year? What do we do? You know, everyone was just scrambling to try to come up with something that would give some sort of learning experience to the students. But it was just, he would have expected that, right? In our lifetimes.
Yes.
And then the following year, starting virtually, we had some training, but you don't know what you don't know. And the training we had was minimal. And still we went into teaching like, I don't know what I'm doing. Pretty much all of us did that.
Wow.
And I can remember being in a meeting, and we were told, well, you just need to move ahead with this. I think we had started something new, and they're like, you just need to move ahead with it. And people were like, wait a second, wait, because we've got kids that are home right now, and they're isolated. They're probably experiencing severe anxiety. They have all these needs. How are we going to do this? They're like, well, we're just going to do it. So you just keep pushing ahead, and everyone's like, oh, okay, we'll do what we can. And it just, and I'm thinking that came from a place of where leadership also was in that same turmoil. Like, we're not sure how long this is going to last. We're not sure how we're going to do this, but we know you can. So just go do.
Mm.
And there she is.
I love live video. It's awesome.
And it was really tough because we were also having anxieties because it was so unknown in those early stages, and
not only as it relates to your job, but life, your family, your health, right, your life, everything,
the people you care about, all of those things. And I think all of us were just kind of doing what we could, but feeling like no matter what it wasn't quite enough. And, we came up with schedules that seemed to work, but even so, it was just really difficult. And then, to just be told, oh, just keep going, it'll be fine, when it wasn't going to be fine, was difficult to hear as well. And I think that, again, as a leader, if you just show that you're willing to listen and tell the people, I get where you're coming from. I understand that this is difficult. Let's look at, and maybe take a few minutes to try to address those concerns in the meeting, rather than just saying, oh no, it'll be fine.
We're in this together.
Yeah, we're in this together, and I'm here as a resource for you. So, and another thing with different leadership, email questions, and instead of getting an answer, well, that needs to go in this website where we have our questions listed, or, oh, here's your part of the contract that will answer that. It's like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted an answer from you because I'm asking you the question. Yeah. So just really, especially under those circumstances, just having that empathy that we talked about, really hear what your people are saying to you. because they may be asking a question that you think they should know the answer to, and maybe it's just their way of trying to connect or their way of trying to make sure you're there to hear them.
Yeah.
Not just, and to get the answer to the question.
Sure. That's a great example. And let's take a minute to look at that through the lens of the model. So what I want you to notice is look at the performance over time. What happens when there is a change and then there is a transition. Notice how during the ending and letting go stage, ending, losing, and letting go, it says it's exactly what you'd expect. It's all about guiding people through the emotions, right? Isn't that what you just said, Brenda?
Mhm.
Associated with the change and communicating how their skills and knowledge will transfer. So guys, you already know how to do this. You already know how to do that. How are those skills going to transfer? Go ahead and do it. I know you can. You already have these skills. And the neutral zone is that they call it the bridge between the old and the new. It's likely to be a time when productivity is at its lowest and your employees are most tempted to give up, right? And then the new beginning is when changes have been accepted and energy is high. But let's take a look at the emotions that go along with these times of transition. So shock, March 13th, 2020, right? That date is etched in my mind. It was a Friday,
Yep.
March 13th.
Friday the 13th.
And I can remember exactly what I was doing. And I had a meeting that afternoon. And I remember that we were saying to each other, should we get together for the meeting? They're saying that we should not, and we decided, okay, we're having the meeting. So we did it. But yeah, shock. And then this can't be happening. 2 weeks, we're going to be closed for 2 weeks. No, 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 no. What's going to happen to us? Come on, you can't tell us to do these, right? Anger, confusion, disorientation, frustration. And let me go to the next one. And look at what's happening here, right? What's happening is this is that messy middle time when nobody really knows what's going on and we're getting reoriented, right? Reoriented so that we can come out of it stronger.
And looking at this, I think this explains a lot of student behaviors at this time as well, because they were part of this. And I know people would say, I can't believe they're not getting on and doing their assignments. I can't believe,
yes,
why aren't they in there? And you would call and email and all of that. Well, this is why. They were confused and frustrated, and probably filled with stress too, along with their teachers and their families.
And do you see
now you've got families who the parents may not be working because their job shut down. So they're home. Maybe they have maybe they're like my one student had several brothers and sisters, and they were all trying to learn all at the same time at home. So that was like anytime she would unmute herself, you could always hear the chatter in the background. So like all of those things happening, of course, it's going to reduce productivity.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I like down at the bottom that avoidance, just don't even want to, I just don't even want to try it.
That's where I head when I'm frustrated.
Yep. Me too.
And totally relate to where the kids were at that time, because that is exactly like, nope, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go watch Netflix.
So within this model, where do you see your experience with COVID right now? Are you into the new beginnings yet?
I think we are. I think last year was still confusing and frustrating for a lot of people because everyone was back together. And last year, and I've talked to teachers in different schools and different districts, and we all found that our students' behaviors were different. Like where they seemed to be socially behind, where my middle school students were exhibiting behaviors that I hadn't seen in middle school before. And I think having everyone all back together was kind of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
So we did see a lot of behaviors and increased in bullying last year as well, and some other stuff. So my hope is that as we come back in for this next year, that we'll have kind of overcome some of that. Um, I mean, for myself, I feel like I'm going into this year with sort of an optimistic attitude that, everyone's kind of used to each other again and used to being out in the world again. So we're picking up, we're going to be a little further ahead than we were last year.
Yeah. So if not through the woods, approaching the new beginnings.
I think so. But there again, that shows how long that has taken.
Yes.
I mean, COVID was a couple school years ago, and we're still kind of seeing some of its effects on everybody, really.
And the expectations for student achievement, right?
Are right back where they were before.
Yeah. And look at the productivity dip
and
the expectations for the teachers.
Yeah.
Right back where it was. I mean, high standards are important. Absolutely.
Right.
But also being mindful of the challenges and what the impact is of change.
And I've always been, and maybe it's because I'm an ELL teacher, it's what I have to do every year, but I've always been a proponent of meeting the kids where they are and getting them where they need to be or where we want them to be. But you have to meet them where we are. And if you have if you have your expectations up here at the beginning and they're down here, you already have a gap happening, and that's just not going to benefit anyone, and it's going to lead to more frustration and probably a longer time in that neutral zone rather than moving into the new beginning phase.
Right. And so you can see again, there's more of this skepticism, and as the folks that are watching this video, think about what skepticism you experienced during that time, and now how are you introducing exploration into this next time? The uncertainty, skepticism, exploration, new beginnings, new commitments. So what do you see as some of the implications then for leaders? And when I say leaders, remember, I'm not just talking administrators, but I'm also talking to the teachers who are watching this and are also leaders, right, in their spheres of influence. What do you see as the implications for both the leaders and the untitled leaders?
Well, if you look in the middle under transition, ensure that people recognize the neutral zone. I think very often we don't realize that actually exists as part of this whole transition, that there is going to be a slide, that there is going to be a slump into all of these things. The change is presented, here you go. Maybe we'll give you a few weeks to get used to it, but the expectation is you go from old to new, done. And if you're not on board, then there's a problem with you rather than a problem with the way it was conveyed. And maybe some people just are anxious about new things. I know several people who get really anxious about new things. Even if it's a positive change, they still get anxious. So just taking that time, again, back to empathy, and realizing that there is going to be a dip, that people are going to go through certain phases, almost like the stages of grief.
Yes.
Where you have to kind of work through those stages before you can get to this acceptance of, okay, this is how it is. Maybe it's not my favorite thing. Maybe it's the greatest thing to me, but I'm in now.
Right. Very good points. So I like how you were talking about being aware that there is going to be that neutral zone, right? That resentment toward the change initiative, the low morale, the low productivity, the anxiety about their role or their identity, their skepticism about the change initiative. So important. But we so badly want that not to be the case, right?
Yeah.
as leaders, we want everybody to adopt it and be happy with it and embrace it and join me in this great vision. Ah, but we really need to be aware that this is the reality of the neutral zone.
I mean, that would be great for the leader if everyone would be like, "Yay, we're so excited." It's obviously easier for them, and it would be easier for the people experiencing the change to be able to do that. But the reality is not it. And everyone's had this happen to them at some point or another, where you get something new and you just don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And it makes you mad, or it makes you feel upset or worried. And it's just how humans are. It's how we're wired.
Yes, we are. There you go. You used the human word. We are leading human beings.
Yep.
Every one of us are leading human beings. We are not leading machines, robots, artificial intelligence. We are leading human beings, and that makes all the difference. So just wrapping this up. So an overview: ending. Before you can begin something new, you have to end what used to be. You need to identify who is losing what and expect a reaction and acknowledge the losses openly. The neutral zone we were just speaking about, and then the new beginnings cannot be planned and predicted, but they can be encouraged, supported, and reinforced. And if you look at the importance and the time axes on this diagram on the right, you can see how the importance continues to rise over time. The new beginning is being the most important. The ending, losing and letting go, and the neutral zone, all part of the process, are all part of that moving forward in time. So I'm curious, Brenda, what were your takeaways? What are some of the ahas when we talked through this earlier this week, and what we just went through now? What are some of your new awareness?
Just for my own self within my classroom, to be aware of how much I'm trying to pressure my students to do certain things because I need something done. Or because I've been given this thing to do within a certain amount of time. So just really to be mindful of how I present things to my classes, how I interact with them. And, if I see that sort of slump because of something new, then I have to take them back off a little and think it through to try to help them navigate. And really that whole neutral zone was a new concept to me, and it just makes so much sense. So that's always now going to be part of my brain, where if I'm trying something new or if something new is happening, I'll know to expect that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think for me, the idea of the importance of addressing the relational piece of it as much as the task piece of it, right? The talking it through, the processing it together for leaders with all the folks that are impacted by the change, and that it takes time. Yeah. And so I want to stop and pause for a second, and I want to ask those who are watching, who've watched this short presentation, this webinar, what resonates with you? And I want to encourage you to pause this video at this moment and take a moment to jot down the things that are sticking with you right now. What are the ahas, the turning points, the changes, the shifts in the way of seeing? Take a pause, hit that pause button, and write a few of those down. Welcome back. And once you've done that, my question that I would want to leave with you as leaders is I want to ask you, how has what you learned today impact how you see yourself leading through the changes and transitions that you have coming into play in this next school year. So you know the new what's the word I'm looking for, Brenda? The new initiatives. That's the word I'm looking for. You know the new initiatives, right, that are coming out, that you're unrolling or rolling out this year. So what are those things that you want to be mindful of? How does what you learned today impact how you see yourself leading through change, and how you want to put processes in place for managing transition in the face of change? And so I want to say thank you for being for watching today, this webinar sponsored by Turning Points in Leadership. Thank you very much to my co-presenter, Brenda Morales, and for sharing your expertise. Brenda, I want to give a wave there, because I know you're on mute. There's stuff happening in your background right now. But thank you, Brenda, for sharing your insight. I so value it because of what you bring from your years of experience in the classroom. It's been for me, about 10 years since I've actually been in the classroom. So it's really important to hear your insight and to be able to apply these ideas to real and relevant circumstances. So I'm very happy and grateful for you for being part of this today. So those of you who are watching, who've watched, again, I want to thank you for tuning in. And if you are not a member of the Turning Points leadership community, I would like to invite you to become a member. As we finish this video, there'll be a trailer here. There'll be a website in the show notes, and you can check out that trailer and come join us in the Turning Points leadership community, where we have leaders who are seriously looking at how they are leading within their spheres of influence so that they can become better leaders for the good of all. So again, thank you for being here today. It's great to have you here. And if I can be of any help, reach out, Dr. Kristen Albert at www.liveworksatisfied.com. Look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, and thanks for being here. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in today. Be sure to take a moment to like, share, and comment on today's episode. If you're not already a member of the Turning Points leadership community, you can accelerate your development as a leader by joining today. You'll find the link to the community in the show notes. If you'd like to be a guest on Kris's show, send an email to turningpointsguest@liveworksatisfied.com. See you next time for more Turning Points in Leadership.